Okie doke. So let's continue on. We started talking about transportation on Tuesday, and how transportation and travel are similar, but they're different. Transportation would be day-to-day going between businesses. We went through that infographic that they have. It would not involve an overnight stay, right? So it's any type of travel, but without an extended stay. Travel, however, would involve some sort of overnight stay. If it's a trip that requires sleep or rest, so at some point during the travel, away from home, away from your tax home. So, like, if you need to go to a conference in Chicago, right, and it's going to involve an overnight stay, at least one night. You can fly there, you can drive there, whatever. Those expenses would then fall under the purview of travel expenses for purposes of the Schedule C and taxes. So there are a couple of differences. One of the big differences between transportation and travel is that when it's travel, you get to actually deduct some of those expenses that you wouldn't ordinarily get to deduct for transportation purposes, like meals. You get to deduct your meals. Whereas when it's just day-to-day stuff, unless you're taking a client out for dinner or something like that, when you're just having lunch, paying for lunch or paying for dinner on your own, you don't get to deduct those things when you're in your tax home area. When you're outside of your tax home area for business, you do get to deduct those meals and incidental expenses, lodging as well. So if you pay for a hotel, you get to deduct the costs of that hotel. There are other types of expenses too. So things like under the incidentals, things like dry cleaning expense would be included in that as well. So if you're there for like a business meeting, you're traveling for a business meeting and you bring your suit or something that needs to be pressed or dry cleaned, that would be included in deductible travel expenses. Okay. Now, oftentimes when people travel for business, they will combine it with personal travel as well. Maybe you've got a conference to go to and you decide to bring your family along. You're going to Orlando for a conference, a 3-day conference. You decide to extend it a couple of days and go to Disney World, right? So if you were to do that, that doesn't mean that the trip isn't deductible. It means that there are some special rules that fall into play when there is some personal component. First off, you have to determine, is the trip primarily business or is it primarily personal? If it's primarily business, then the costs of getting to and from the location are deductible business expenses. So your flights to Orlando to and from would be deductible. Now, if you bring your family along, the cost of their flights is not a deductible business expense, but the cost of your flight is. And when I say predominantly, so you're going to Orlando for 5 days, 3 days of which is a conference, and then you're tacking on an extra 2 days to go to Disney World. That's a primarily business trip, right? The majority of your time is going to be spent on business. The reason that you're going is for business, as opposed to you're planning a family vacation to Disney World, and you just happen to have a client who lives in Orlando. So while you're there, you go and meet with that client for a lunch meeting, and you discuss business. It's a legitimate business meeting, but it changes the nature of that travel. Now it's predominantly personal, and you're attaching some business component to it, which means that the travel expenses to and from Orlando are no longer deductible. What is deductible would be, say you hired an Uber to get you from the hotel to the restaurant where you're meeting the client. That would be deductible. The cost of the meal with your client, that would also be deductible. But the actual travel expenses, so anything related to the business meeting while you're there would be a deductible business expense, but the actual travel expenses of getting to Orlando and back would not be. Also, the meals and lodging would not be deductible either in that circumstance. Now, the other circumstance where it's predominantly business, the lodging expenses would be deductible, but only for the time period when it's actually for business. So those first 3 days, when you're in your business meetings, the lodging would be deductible for those days. The meals would be deductible. Your meals, your family meals wouldn't be. But those other 2 days that you tacked on to go visit Disney World, those would not be deductible days, business deductible. Okay? So questions about that? It just depends on whether it's predominantly business or predominantly personal. Any questions about the difference between those? No? Okay. Oh yeah, go ahead.
There's a problem with the hardware
Mm-hmm.
about that and kind of struggle with it.
Okay.
Because it's like, it's for both travel, but she also visited friends.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
Is the one that has like 9 days business, 5 days?
So she said, she spent 2 days travel, conducted business for 9, visited friends for 5.
Okay. Is it a domestic trip or is it international?
I'm gonna go to Denver.
Okay, so it's a domestic trip. So 9 days, you said 9 days total or 9 days on business, 5 days?
Yeah.
That's a
so
long
9 days
trip.
on business, 5 days with friends, and she spent 2 days in travel.
And 2 days in travel. Okay. So, and are they asked, what's the question? How many days are,
So like, nutrition, how much can she deduct her expenses?
okay. Well, let's take a look at that one while we're talking about this. Go see if I can find it. Which number is that?
Number 8.
Because it just gives a total of everything. Just the airfare is the one that in the climb.
Okay, so Jordan took business trip, spent 2 days in travel, conducted business for 9 days, visited friends for 5 days. She incurred the following expenses. How much can she deduct? Alright, so the air. Okay, so the lodging, we're gonna have to apportion that, right? So, the meals as well. We haven't gotten to this yet, but entertainment expenses are not deductible at all. There's no deduction for entertainment. So that $750 would not be included. The meals for tax years 2021 and 2022, the meals are 100% deductible. Before 2021, they're 50% deductible. After 2022, they are 50% deductible. They passed a special law that made those 100% deductible during COVID because why do you think? Any guesses why they might do that?
So for 2021, they were 100%.
2021 and 2022, 100% deductible. I don't know about 2020. Your textbook just says 2021. I would think 2020 as well, but maybe not because it would have been retroactive. But what was happening to restaurants during COVID? They were shut down. People weren't going out to eat. That was to try and encourage people, which is kind of funny because they didn't want you to go leave your house, but we want you to go out to eat, right? I was a little schizophrenic, but but it is only temporary that it's 100% deductible. So I'd say conducted business for 9 days, visited friends for 5 days. in total, she had 9, 5, 14, 16 days. So, 5 by 16, 31.25% is personal, is what I would calculate for the lodging and the meals. Although the lodging, let's see how they did this. Let's see how they handled this. Did anybody come up with the answer for this first off before I do this? No? Is that my phone going on? Turn it on, do not
No, it's
disturb.
mine, sorry.
Oh, okay, that's okay. Say I put mine on, do not disturb. Alright, so, the lodging. So, 55% times 1666, and we'll see if I'm anywhere near right here. 1667 for lodging. And then for the meals, I'd say that was 45 409. Might be completely off here. Seem like weird numbers.
It's a
Oh, I didn't do the
2076.
airfare.
You put it in wrong anyways.
What's that?
You had the 6 and the 7 switched anyways, so.
Oh, to it. 26. Let's see. Oh. These are complete, but not entirely correct. Alright.
What is the lodging, like, wouldn't it just be 9/14, because 2 days you're traveling, right? So like you're driving,
Oh, you're right, I had my denominator wrong. I put down, yeah.
so in total it's 16 days, but like actual days she was like, I guess staying, it was 14 or like sleeping.
So 1929.
I'm not sure. The numbers are.
Yeah. That was 9 divided by 5. Oops, wrong way. 500. This is what I get. Let's see, 2879. Maybe they're using the same proportion. So, 14 days, well, it's actually 16 days if you include the 2 travel days, right? Oops. 625. Anybody have it right yet? 100% of the airfare, right? It's just figuring out that lodging and meals, what the proportion is. Let's try this. $507. Nope. Did I just put that in? So let's do 9/16.
Is there such thing as lodging being included in a flight that takes 2 days?
Well, it wouldn't be included. 2193 plus 2744 is what she said. What the heck? Is the lodging?
Yeah, so like, she took a 2-day travel flight, and I'm like, I wonder if she just stopped off, and then they.
Oh, yeah, that's right, what Margaret's saying, it's 11/16,
Yep,
it includes
9, 10, 11.
the travel, the 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you're right.
Wow, that's
So,
tricky. Hold on, let me just like, how long is a flight usually?
From New York to Denver, it shouldn't be 2 days.
She prayed
2681 plus.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
3231,
Yeah, that's, yeah.
is that it? Yes, okay, so, you are absolutely right, Margaret,
She
so,
said drove. Weird, but.
so total days were 16, right? We've got 9 plus 5, 14 plus 2 travel days, 15, 16. 11 of the days were business, because it's predominantly business here, 11 of the days were business, 9 days actually there, and then the 2 travel days. So 11/16, so 11 divided by 16, 68.75% of the lodging and meals would be deductible business expenses. Total of that is $3,900. All of the airfare, $3,231. Does that make sense? Finally? Alright. For foreign travel, it's a little bit different, there are some additional limitations on it. It would be considered entirely business if it meets one of these criteria. So if the taxpayer does not have substantial control over arranging the trip, if the taxpayer is outside the US no more than 7 consecutive days, but here we don't count the travel days. Taxpayer spends less than 25% of the time on personal activities. The days on which the trip began and ended are counted in that case. Vacation is not a major component for the taxpayer. Okay, so a little bit different requirements for foreign travel as to whether or not you get to deduct some of those, how you get to deduct the expenses. Okay, if it's considered primarily business, taxpayer has to still allocate travel time between the business days and non-business days. The deductible amount of the round trip travel expenses, the taxpayer would multiply the total trip by the fraction of the number of business days to the number of travel days outside the US. So whereas before we're taking 100% of the travel costs, for foreign travel we're not. We're apportioning that between business and personal. Weekends and holidays are considered business days. So if it covers a weekend or holiday, you would include the business days. Vacation taken beyond the place of business activities, travel deduction is limited to those expenses to and from the business location. Okay, so that's where if you're, that would be predominantly personal. Okay, meals and entertainment. I don't know why they include entertainment here. Entertainment's not deductible, full stop. So you can't take clients to sporting events, or can't take clients to any type of entertainment event and deduct it. You can still take them, you just can't deduct it for tax purposes. Also, memberships are no longer deductible. So, like, businesses used to, they belong to the country club and use it as a way to go bring clients and entertain them at the country club. That's no longer deductible at all. Doesn't mean you can't do it, just means it's not deductible. There are a couple of different ways for counting the meals itself and the lodging. You can use the actual expenses if you want, that's fine. Or you can use a standard rate, kind of like with mileage. It's called the CONUS rate, which stands for Continental US. It varies. Now the rate that they have in here listed for the CONUS rate, $151, that is a general rate. Different localities have different rates though. Like Des Moines is about that amount for both lodging. I think it's a little higher. I think it was $131 for lodging in Des Moines. I can't remember what it was for meals and incidentals. That would be including 3 meals a day, any incidental expenses. So it depends on, this is like an average rate. It depends on the location. We looked up in my class last night, we looked up the New York CONUS rate, and it was like, for the hotel, lodging was like $286, and meals was, I don't know, close to 100 or something like that. So it would depend on the location, what the average costs are in that area. So you can use these standard rates instead. You still need to keep receipts for the lodging and meals. It's just an easier way to just calculate it out, okay, or to take that deduction. I'm tripping over my words today. Questions about that? All right. Let's start talking about business use